Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our next speaker, Robert Carson, presenting the topic, Guerrilla Warfare for the Blue Team.
Am I good? Yeah. All right. Y'all hear me? Yeah. All right. Super excited to do this. Thank you guys for having me here. This is my first time doing this talk with a non-US audience. So, as a quick disclaimer, I'm going to show pictures of Gaddafi, Saddam, Che Guevara, Mao Zedong, whoever it is. I'm not endorsing any of these people. We're just talking about facts, things that we can learn from insurgent tactics, things like that. Okay? I want to be clear, I don't want to get canceled today, because it's probably coming. My background, so before I got into cybersecurity, I was a Marine Corps infantry officer. I lived with the Iraqi Army for a year on one of my tours, where I got to see a lot of really cool things and see how the Iraqi Army was able to operate without a lot of technology, right? A lot of people and process. They would come in, we would go to these different villages, they would dress somebody up in a ski mask, they would point out where the bad guys were, where the cache was. By lunch, we were usually having a lamb feast. It was wonderful. Far less kinetic than you might imagine. And then a corporate background, so been on your side. In America, we call it the blue team. Those are the good guys, right? Red team are all the cool guy hackers that, get to speak at DEF CON. I'll never get to speak there because I'm not that cool. But, they're the guys that, no one ever gets an email. You guys don't get emails saying, hey, thanks for not getting ransomware today, right? But you're the ones who prevent it. That's the blue team, right? Yeah, and I run SemperSec, so I've got 10 employees. We do the arts and crafts of cyber, but I'm not here to sell you what I do, so who cares? And yeah, as we're going through, please feel free to ask questions. You can raise your hand, assuming I can see you, and away we go. First, another disclaimer, this talk is not about overthrowing your boss. Changes in leadership may produce undesired results. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about purpose and motivation. We're going to talk about tools and techniques. How do we execute some current events? All right. So what is warfare? All right. How many people do I have in here that are prior military at all? Got one? Okay, cool. So you'll hear multi-generations of warfare. So when you think of first-gen warfare and second-gen warfare, first-gen warfare is basically people online shooting at each other with bows and arrows with muskets, up to muskets, right? Second-gen warfare, we're still online, but now we've got rifles. So that's like your World War I type scenario. That's your second-gen warfare. You'll hear Gen 3 warfare. Gen 3 warfare is big maneuver elements. That's World War II. That's the Germans coming through. That's the big left hook that the U.S. Army took during the first Gulf War. That's your third-gen warfare. And then fourth gen is decentralized. That's your guerrilla warfare. Those are your guerrilla tactics. That's things that happen in current events today. All right. And then fifth gen warfare, it's still debatable what that exactly is, but a lot of it people are looking at as more as piracy, your ransomware, your letters of marque, where people are operating independently but sanctioned by countries, things like that. Less ideologically driven, more financially driven. Whereas your fourth gen are generally more ideologically driven. And how does that apply to the corporate world, right? Well, if you think about your third gen warfare, right, there's a front and a back. There's good guys are over here, bad guys are over here. That's maybe what your environment looked like pre-COVID, where everyone went to the office, they did their work, and they left, right? Or you VPN'd in, you hit your network, and you were in the good guy zone. Post-COVID, the perimeter is dead. Long live the new perimeter, right? So that's kind of how it applies. When you want to think about it, is like what your old school world was versus what your new school. All right. So one of the things that you need to know if you're going to launch a guerrilla campaign is you need to have the right mindset. So this is a term coined by General Krulak called a three-block war. Three-block war, and basically, and it's very true, in 3 city blocks, you can be handing out candy, doing a medical intervention, helping people out. Second city block, you're doing patrols. And the third city block, you're in kinetic attack. And if you want a copy of this, I'll just send you, just let you know. You don't have to take a picture of everyone, it's cool. You can see right here, copy, distribute, and close without permission. Because that's not a typo, that's intentional. Back to the 3-block war. So how does that apply to your day-to-day basis running cybersecurity at your companies? Well, in the morning, maybe you're doing some training, helping people learn how to change their passwords for the first time, holding their hands. It's going to be okay. We're going to do this, right? Putting on MFA. In the middle of the day, maybe you've got a change management meeting, maybe your governance meeting, something like that. That's your patrols. And then, because nobody attacks at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday after you've had your first cup of coffee, it's the end of the day. That's when the cyber attack happens. And that's when you can tell people to shut up and color, right? But the way you operate and your mentality is different during those different phases. And that's very important as a cybersecurity professional and as a guerrilla warfighter, is to be able to engage with people the right way, right? So in the morning, you're super friendly. Maybe in the evening, when you're in kinetic action, it's a little more direct, right? All right. The other thing you need to know about is hybrid warfare, right? So luckily, I don't have to explain some of this to this audience, but it's just like the Russians during 2014. They started using, text messages, things like that. The little green men were coming over, things like that, pushing that information out. That's the same as you putting up posters in your conference rooms. I used to put them in the bathrooms. I'd put the security newsletter in the bathroom stall, because while you're sitting there, I have your attention, and you can read about cybersecurity. That's right. But the point is using different tactics, right? Different tools, techniques, whatever it takes. We're seeing drone warfare, right? That's coming up now. But there's always an information campaign, things like that. So what does that mean for the corporate world, right? So it's phishing attacks, maybe inviting your executives to a cybersecurity conference. Maybe it's ConnectWise Con. Maybe you can get them all the way out to Vegas, go out to DEF CON, and they can really get scared. It'll be fun. But it's also tripwires, honeypots, honey nets, things like that. Using those, what is it called, the yellow canaries, like things like that. That can be considered hybrid warfare. All right. So the other part, if you're going to launch a guerrilla campaign, that's what we're trying to do today. You got to have a good cause. All right. That's one of the most important things, because if you're walking around trying to push out cybersecurity to people, they don't care. Like my company, we help companies put in cybersecurity programs. Some of our customers are cybersecurity companies. Nobody does this stuff for fun. Okay? Maybe you do, but the rest of us, we don't wake up in the morning going, man, I can't wait to put multi-factor on. That sounds awesome. Like, that's not what happens, right? So you've got to think about your messaging and what you're talking about. What's that cause that resonates? So, these are different types of causes, right? What are you fighting for? Making sure that you've got something that people care about, right? So is it about their paychecks? Is it about business? Is it about market opportunities? Is it things like that? Downtime, something that they might actually care about, as opposed to running around going, the hackers are coming, the hackers are coming. Nobody cares. It is what it is, right? And if you want to look at historical examples, so if you look at, there's a thing called the Sunni Awakening. It was in 2007, I think, in Iraq. And essentially, we had a group of disenfranchised Sunnis that were in power during Saddam. Now they're no longer in power. We started cooperating with them in Al-Anbar province. We started making their own local patrols. Because we had a cause that resonated. Both sides wanted to go back to, they wanted to run their businesses. They wanted to farm their dirt. They wanted safety. They didn't want the bad guys there. So we started working together. We had a cause that resonates that created that group, and we were able to be very successful in bringing the attacks down in Al-Anbar province. But we found that cause that generated support. Super important. All right. The other thing too is you need to have a cause that generates support internally and externally. That's why your customers, your verticals that you're going into, that might matter more than anything else, because you want to be able to get support not only from inside the company, but your investors, your customers. What do they care about? Using them as advocates for your cause. And if you guys have questions along the way, feel free to shoot them out. I get excited. All right. So I love this quote. So this is a quote. I'm gonna give you guys a quote by Che Guevara. And again, I'm not endorsing Che in any way, shape, or form, but his quote is, "The peasant must be helped technically, economically, morally, and culturally. The guerrilla fighter must be sort of a guiding angel who has fallen into the zone, helping the poor always and bothering the rich as little as possible in the first phases of war." So what Che is saying and how that applies to us is don't be an ass, right? So when someone gets infected with their laptop, or they let their kids do their homework on it, and now it's got Roblox and all sorts of fun things. I'm sure no one's ever come across that. Hand them an Etch-a-Sketch. You guys know what an Etch-a-Sketch is in Lithuania? Okay, I just want to make sure. Like, that's their new tablet. They'll be secure for a minute. It'll be fine. Like, have fun with it. But screaming at them isn't going to help, right? So you want to be there to help them. You don't want to yell at people when they screw up, because they're going to screw up. But the minute you start screwing up, yelling at them, they're going to stop talking to you. They're going to stop giving you intel what's going on. You're going to be seen as a problem, not as someone that's positive, that's there to help them, right? So you want to think about that mentality when you're working with your analysts, because like, you got to remember, all day long, this might be what we think about, but I can guarantee you it's not what they think about. So, and these tactics, like, this is no joke. This is stuff that, like, this is from Che Guevara. Like, these are guerrilla. He wrote a book on guerrilla warfare. Mao Zedong wrote one. Trenquier wrote one. French dude. These are all tactics that come from historical examples. So treat others you want to be treated, right? So describing what your rules of engagement are going to be. How are you going to handle it? You know, one of the fun things I like to do is I like to block MySpace. You know why? That's how you figure out who the weirdo is. Because you want to see who complains. Yeah, exactly. That's that guy that's like an elf level 5 or something in Dungeons and Dragons or something. Just saying, it's possible. All right, so what tools and techniques? So let's talk about the historical example here. So luckily with this group, you might actually know who these people are. American audience is a little different. The guy on the right, Erdogan. Anyone know who the guy on the left is? Or this guy? Hosni Mubarak, right? So he was the former president of Egypt, or prime minister, I'm not really sure at this point. But one guy used excellent communication, this guy, and he shut down a coup using FaceTime. He did. It happened, right? He created a cause that resonated. He created what you could argue would look like a modern-day Tiananmen Square, where he had tanks, and he had his supporters out on a bridge over the Bosphorus in Istanbul, created that imagery that the Turks didn't want to go with, so that he wound up staying in power. Hosni Mubarak lost control of his power. He was helped by a bunch of hacktivist groups, anonymous, things like that. They were shown, they gave the locals how to get their message out, which created that cause that resonated, right? So he couldn't just shut down the protests that were going on in Tahrir Square, right? And now he's no longer in power. So that's why communication is a big piece of your security program. And that's one of the things I think, you go to these conferences and it's super tech, and it's all awesome. But you got to be able to talk to humans. You got to know what they want, right? We got to be able to think about that. I'm going to pause for a second. Are there any questions in the chat thing? No, not yet? All right, cool. Really, yeah. All right. So let's talk about what matters to them, right? Treat them as civilians or prospective members of your local militia. I gave a talk yesterday on changing paradigms and talking about using business information security officers. Same thing, finding those people, those allies in those different departments who can be part of your security program, who can help you, give you intel what's going on with the different types of business, what's going on in the business, what do they care about, what struggles they're having, so that you can be a part of the solution. It's like single sign-on. It's good for security. It also makes people's lives a lot easier sometimes, right? Things like that. Figuring out how to get your intel sources and talking to people in a way that resonates with them. What do they actually care about? All right. And here you go. Here's a list of what matters to them. So sales, they care about ease of transaction. They want to make money. So hey, I had a problem. I had half the sales team hadn't done their security training, but I was doing all these calls, all these questionnaires. You guys don't get any of those in Lithuania? No, no questionnaires from your customers. Security addendums? Nobody? Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure I wasn't the only one. We got all these questionnaires, right? I told this head of sales, I was like, I can't do any more of these because I'd be lying because your team isn't doing their security training. And I was like, maybe 3:30 on a Thursday. By 7 a.m. on Friday, the entire sales team had done their security training because they cared, right? Because I talked about what mattered to them. Dev, not slowing down on deployments. We don't want to talk to Dev about their MacBooks. That'll just piss them off. They're more paranoid than we are. You want to talk about how to do 1,000 pushes a day and be compliant. You want to be able to make them faster, right? Sometimes you have to have that discussion that DevOps is not Lord of the Flies and you can do whatever you want. That's actually not DevOps, but whatever. Yeah. Yeah. You know the difference though. Like that's I don't know if that's actually, every once in a while I might come across a company and I'm like, that's not DevOps. That's just you're doing whatever you want. Employees keep the customers happy, they like paychecks. General counsel, they like defendable positions, right? So what matters to them? It's important. So successful Guerrilla is going to have a plan, right? So you need to have that plan that resonates economic growth, right? We talked about this. Ooh, careful, big dumb American. Cause that resonates, uses intelligence. We talked about all this. Understand the long game. Use your resources strategically. You don't have unlimited budget. What's up? You raise your hand? No. Understand the long game. Use your resources strategically, right? That's an important piece. You don't have unlimited budget. You can't do all the things. So what can you be good at? What matters? You can do a lot of free security with the tools you already have. If you're an O365 shop, you're a Gmail shop, whatever, there's a lot of stuff that's already built in. Sometimes it's just upgrading a license. It's not the end of the world. Like you don't need to go buy all the things. All right, what do we got here? We used to build blue teams based on military structure and pattern. Do you think it's still valid? I do, but I think you need to look at it. It depends on how you, I guess, for whoever's asking that question, were you building like platoons or your own little fiefdom? Or were you building decentralized advisory units? Would be the question I'd ask. Because the way I look at it now, as opposed to trying to build a big command structure, I'm decentralizing my stuff. So I have advisors that go, I have specialists, and I embed them. Either I cut them from my team and put them with dev, or I put them with certain departments so that they're able to support and be part of that unit and be far more effective. Where was the clicker? It's impressive. All right. And what you want to think about for your ecosystem, right? Here's your business. Here's what we do. You got your regulatory bodies. So here's all the different risks that come around, right? Nation state actors. You have, for those of you who live around here, you have some neighbors to the east that maybe you're not friends on Facebook with. It is what it is. But knowing what's going on, right? And understanding like what is your ecosystem? What's the target? What are they actually after? And then build your threat intel. I don't know if this resonates with 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, but figure out who's brought stuff in. So one of the things that I always tell people to do is that any organization, there's 2 organization charts. There's the official one that HR draws. It's really pretty and it's nice. And then there's the real one. Because what happens with most organizations is like for myself. I went from one company to the next. Guess what? I brought in other people from the previous company I'd worked with, right? And they may not be underneath me. They may be sitting over in a different department, but they're my boy. I already see them we have barbecues on the weekends, things like that. You need to know who's connected to who and why, because that can be your influencers. Those are the people that can influence something. You can say something at lunch inadvertently that can wind up getting back to the person you're trying to influence. So you need to have those 2 org charts in mind. You need to understand there are 2 org charts. Have no illusions that it's all perfect and respect that. And one of the things you want to think about is, and the reason why 2 org charts is important is it's way easier if you have a known identity and a known risk, or a known identity and an unknown risk, right? You don't know exactly what the risk is, but you know that you know that you've identified them, as opposed to unknown identities and unknown risks. You can't protect against that. You can't do anything with it, right? So when you're building your intel, trying to get that who's actually after me. I may not know the risk, but I want to know identify the risk actors. Who are my threat actors? Who are coming after me? And this is one thing that, yeah, if you want to take a picture of this, if you want the whole slideshow, I would take a picture of this. This is, as stupid as this is, any metrics you're building, if you're trying to quantify your security program, trying to build intel and validate the efficacy of how things are working, you should be able to write something like this that says, this is how we're going to collect the data. This is what we're going to do with the data when something goes wrong. Who's going to collect it? How often we're going to evaluate it? All of those things. If you can't define that for a metric, why are you collecting it? It doesn't produce action otherwise. If the metric just looks cool, it's like people all the time, I see them track number of vulnerabilities. Who gives a crap? What I care about are the number of vulnerabilities that are new, that weren't remediated, that are highs and criticals within 30 days. That's a metric that tells me if my security program is working or not. I don't really care how many vulnerabilities I have. We're always going to have new vulnerabilities. I care about how old they are, the aging, right? For something that might produce action. So I highly recommend stealing that from me, please. And then there's lots of threat feeds. People will sell you all sorts of stuff. I know this is Twitter. Now it's X, whatever. But this is a tweet deck. I think you can still do it. It's free, right? You get that and a Have I Been Pwned account. Guess what? You've already started your intel feeds. You can buy a bunch of stuff out there, and there's some great intel providers, I'm sure, maybe even here. But what are you going to do with it? Is it curated? Is it valid for what you do? Right? And I used to do this. This is great because like everyone thinks they're getting DDoS. Half the time they're really not. And also you can use this for locations, right? So if you have offices in certain places where you have employees, things like that, know what's going on in those different environments. I used to do that all the time when we was an international company. So I was able to validate like, hey, they're going to be protesting near that office, stuff like that. Actually, here we go. All right, embed people, right? Decentralized workforce, so should your security program. I talked about this in the last talk, but people, process, technology, right? Where are your people? Put them in the right spots, or build your influencing campaign. You know, we all got influencers now. You can be a cybersecurity influencer. Be the new hotness, right? Maybe you'll get invited to something cool. Probably not, but you know. The other thing too is like when you're rolling out a program, you know, just as in any guerrilla fight, the support of the population is conditional on your ability to execute. So if you try to roll out an entire program all at once, you're going to have a bad day, because if you're not there to move quickly on third-party risk assessments or security training or updates, whatever it is that they need, whatever you're rolling out, they're going to start going around you. So you want to make sure that the support of your, knowing that that support is conditional will help you understand that you can't screw up. You've got to be tight. You got to make sure that your part, whatever your role is very efficient and effective. All right. Problem with the threat intel in Lithuania is that we are not hiring them. Companies see no value in CTI teams. Hashtag sad CTI is diff in the US. I like it. Well, you don't need to necessarily hire threat intel. That's the thing, is like you can get feeds. What kind of intel do you actually need? What are you going to do with it? Are you building dossiers? Or are you just doing, what kind of intel do you actually need? Are you I got a customer that's what do they do? A non-for-profit. So they fundraise all over the U.S. to prevent suicide. They have a lot of social media. So what do we care about? I care about their social media. So that's where I build the threat intel, and that's what we recommend if they're looking at certain products or things like that, or how to do it cheaply, what to look for, what the risks are, right? Because they've had it happen where someone left and they wound up with QAnon taking over their feed, which, for those of you who don't know what QAnon is, don't worry about it. You're better off. Any suggestions on effective threat intelligence, implementation strategic, or there you go. I think I just kind of covered that. Of like, what does the company do? So what the intel feeds do you need? You need to figure that out, because every one of these dark web things, the dark web scanners, blah, 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 like it sounds friggin' great. Half the time, it's not gonna do anything for you, right? You can get intel feeds from your SIMs, things like that. There's different threat actors, but are they targeting you? Or is it just purely random acts of hacking? You know, I remember back in the day, I get all these bash attacks. And I was like, but I don't run Linux outside, so why am I doing this? It's a good question. What else we got? How is the transition from the military to IT? Any challenges? It was pretty, actually, it wasn't that bad. So I was a Marine Corps infantry officer, didn't know anything about cybersecurity or IT. I knew how to herd nerds. I could buy pizza and Red Bull and let them solve the problems. That was my key to success. I paid for a lot of lunches with engineers so they could teach me things. Because I've had so many things explained to me with salt shakers and ketchup bottles and whatever was on the table. That's how I learned, right? Because it's really just different weapon systems for me. It's just, I need to know how to employ them. How are they used correctly? What makes the most sense? Those are the questions I asked. So that was how I transitioned. The only challenge I had was figuring out what to wear to work every day. That was probably my biggest transition, because, you know, you're in the military, you just have your uniform. It's easy. And there was one more. What is the most challenging situation you encounter with blue teams? Yeah. They hold on to their precious. I would say that's the biggest challenge I see with blue teams, is they sit there and it's like, this is my precious. I have to hold on to it. I have to insert myself into every single process and be a part of everything. Stop. You need to distribute that accountability to the different business departments. Make them responsible. You're not the risk owner. So stop worrying about risks that aren't yours to be responsible for. Your job is to advise, to help make sure they understand things. But at the end of the day, if they don't care, you don't care. Like, you have to learn to let some stuff go, right? Because you're going to wind up bald looking like me. I say this from a guy who's screwed this up and done it the wrong way, okay? Like, have no illusions that I got this right the first time. Unfortunately, I got it wrong. But that's where I've learned. That's a great question, though. Anything else going on right now? If not, all right, keep going. All right. So, information, I/O, right? So, Zelensky. How many people have seen that green t-shirt just about every single conference call? It might be a blue t-shirt every once in a while, right? His messaging is on key, on point, over and over, repetitive. I need F-16s, I need F-16s, I need weapons, I need this, I need this, I need this. He is always on message, doesn't deviate. He has a great I/O campaign, okay? That's very important. Your messaging needs to be consistent. What are you here for? You're here to enable the business. You're not here to make people's lives suck. Nobody wakes up in the morning going, hey, how can I screw up your day? All right? People think that. It looks like you do. But I can tell you, there's no security person in the world that's been like, man, I want to talk to DevOps today. I'm going to turn on some AV malware and just see what happens. You know?
I'm just saying there are people in the world who wake up and just want to make your life suck.
You know,
It's about at least a few people just mentioning things that,
you know, well, I won't get into your personal life, but I can tell you, for the most part, people don't, because they're busy, right? They aren't, but there are people out there, that's true. But for the most part, you don't. And you as a security person need to guard against that, because you're absolutely right. Like, that's how you feel, right? And like, if you're a security person, you need to recognize that's how people may perceive you, right? So again, back to that messaging campaign, how do they look at you? What is their perception of you? Are you a force for good or a force for bad? Are you trying to help people or not? right? Because like I remember I had this Irishman came in and he's like, he's all pissed off, and I'm like, you're right. I turned this on this morning just so you come talk to me. How you doing, bud? Like, and he's, he de-escalated really quickly because he realized like, no, I had no interest in talking to him. I don't know what happened. Let's figure it out, right? But you have to guard against that, because you're absolutely right though, to that mentality of like, if you feel that way, that's how there are people in your organization that might have that perception of you. So understand, how are they viewing you? All right. And again, about IO, remember, if you're doing counterinsurgency, and this is the difference between insurgency and counterinsurgency, insurgents can lie. Counterinsurgency, you have to inform. You're not there to fool people. But you remember, you're not the only one with the cause, right? Think about when Snowden breached the NSA, right? At first, it was a guy from Booz Allen Hamilton. Very quickly, it was a government contractor. That's how the IO messaging was, right? Think about every time Boeing has an issue, or Airbus. The other airline, the other airplane manufacturers don't go out there and go, oh, Boeing's bad. Like, they might get a little pissed recently, but for the most part, they aren't, because you know why? They don't want to create a mentality of air travel is unsafe, right? So they kind of stay silent. They aren't trying to tell you that that airline is unsafe and their airplanes are safe. That would be stupid. That's why you want to think about the messenger, what you hear, what you don't hear. And do you have an information campaign for when you have to do incident response? That's one thing I think that people do very poorly, is that when you roll out your incident response plan, you're doing your training, right? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn this on. We're going to log this. Do you have marketing as part of those tabletop exercises? Sales, customer success, whatever you call them. Those people need to be part of those exercises. And I would make those exercises all about them. I would keep all the nerd stuff in a separate conference, because they don't want to hear it. They don't care about bits and bytes. Their eyes are going to glaze over, okay? But you want to have because like, who's going to, not me? I'm not allowed to talk to the public. I can talk to you. That's about it, right? Not all of us are qualified for that. So what is your messaging campaign going to be if you get ransomware? What are you going to tell people, right? Let's say you're a public entity. I got a customer that's a major port. They're like, oh, that would be awful. What do we do, right? Like, those are the things you need to think about. What's your IO campaign when you do have incident response? How am I doing on time here? 15? All right, cool. So I had this slide just the other day because I met some dudes from Falco. But as you're looking at resources, what do you have? Open source. I used to be, I would say, not anti-open source, but I would discourage it with most of my customers. That has changed over the recent years. There's things like the Linux Foundation, OpenSS Scorecard. Those are ways where, if you're going to use open source things to save yourself money because you don't have the money, but you might have the engineering talent, those are ways to do it and validate those projects are valid. There's a community behind it, and you'll be able to keep up to date. Because the biggest risk when you use open source is you got no one to blame, you got no support, right? So those are ways you want to mitigate the risk, using your resources appropriately, right? Because you don't have unlimited budget. Maybe you can use open source for some things. And besides, you're not paying for stuff you don't need. All right, execution. Where do we operate first? Anyone here old enough to know what The Office is? Do you have the TV show up over here? Okay. I had the other day, people had never even seen The Office, and I felt very old. I was sad. What's that? Yeah, see, I'm glad, it's like, I'm not that old. But you need a mutual cause, right? So maybe you work with the people that support certain things. Maybe you leave dev out of it, depending on how your deployment cycle looks like with your software product. Let's say, if you could treat it as commercial off-the-shelf software if it was different releases. Ops takes it, tests it, just like they would any piece of software, and you could leave dev out of it at first. Or you put dev in it, which is where if they're a DevOps operation, and you start with them. Maybe you keep sales out of it, because who cares? The sales have access to the data. Keeping your program based on what actually matters. So I go back to military classifications. You've got for official use only. You've got secret. You've got top secret. Guess what? There are rules for handling those types of data. That's how your security program should be written too. What matters, why, right? That way it makes sense. You're not putting in man traps for things that don't matter, right? You're basing the level of pain is commensurate with the risk, and it's something people can actually understand. All right, now we're executing our guerrilla fight. You can do drawn out execution. That's what Mao Zedong did. The problem with that is you can have loss of will, missed opportunities, right? You might get a call from Brian Krebs. If you don't know who Brian Krebs is, he's like the Diane Sawyer, like the investigative reporter of InfoSec. If you get a call from that person, you should just hang up, update your resume, and walk out. To be honest, it's not going to be a good day, I would assume. But the other part though of drawn out is it doesn't matter how far you, how slow you go, it's just as long as you get to the end, right? So I like medium pace, but you can do drawn out execution. There's the shortcut method. This is what ISIS did. They went all or nothing, right? This works right before an audit, right after a breach. That's when you can break things and it's okay, all right? But the problem with that is like, you've got to be in a spot where like it's okay to break things and shut people off because you're rolling out security tools very quickly, enforcing things, and it might overcorrect, and you got to be prepared for that. So that's your shortcut method. That's why I say the medium pace is a good way to do it. I always look at, if I'm deploying a program, I start with 6 months to certification because there's only so much time, so much change an organization can absorb, but you also need to keep it moving. If you want it to take 2 years, it'll take 2 years, but it doesn't have to, right? Good. You guys don't even know that commercial. But movement, right? Now you've got support. You've got your insurgent program. You've got your cause that resonates. We're moving through that execution phase, right? Now it's time to change your tactics and techniques. In Iraq, they would have roadside bombs, right? And they were using garage door openers. So we put a big metal, like axe, almost like 6-foot axe in front of our Humvees that would literally heat up, and it would detonate the IEDs. It would blow up into the engine compartment, saving the Marines' lives. What did they do? Well, they started using radio frequencies. What did we do? We started jamming all the radio frequencies, even our own. It was great. But the point is changing tactics, techniques, and procedures. So what worked won't always work. If you've used posters, you put posters up, or you do a certain type of security training, maybe it's time to change it up, right? If it's the know before, blah, 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 okay, let's change it up. Let's do something different, right? Rotate that stuff. Continue to evolve what you're doing, how you're reaching people, things like that. There's no reason why you have to write all your policies and procedures, or your procedures especially. You can make a YouTube video for a work instruction. Press Zoom, press record, now your work instruction's done, right? Here's your little internal YouTube video library. Make it easy. Cessation. Okay, once you accomplish your mission, make peace, disenfranchise, and new problems. All right, real quick. Anyone know who these people are? You should all be embarrassed because you do. But do you know who these people are? This should really embarrass you. I will pay for someone's steak dinner. I'll give you 50 euros right now. If anyone can give me 6 out of 5, or 6 out of 7, because math is hard. 5? Wait, what'd you say? Which one? You're talking about this guy? This one? Who did you say?
No, not that one. Down right, yeah. That's Latin.
Che Guevara. All right, what about this one? It's not a proper military presentation without a dead Prussian. Clausewitz, yeah, there we go. Mao? Sun Tzu? This is a Brazilian guy. That's Fabius. He's like the OG of guerrilla warfare. He was blocking Hannibal as they was coming through the Alps. And this gentleman right here wrote another great book on guerrilla warfare. A French guy named Tranquier. I do not endorse his tactics, but dude's a tough dude. Yeah. All right. How am I doing on time? Am I done? All right, 5 minutes. We're going to do some questions here. I'm skipping current events. The only thing I'd like to push, actually, that website is long. It's blueteamwarriorpodcast.com. If you would like to be on my podcast, it's 10 minutes. I'd love to hear stories of you of things that worked. I don't need to hear stuff that didn't work. We got plenty of that stuff. I want to hear a story of something that actually happened. So it's blueteamwarriorpodcast.com, not Blue Team Warrior, although, I don't know, maybe it is. You'll see it on LinkedIn. I'd love to have you sign up. Hit me up. Love to hear your story. Okay? It's a chance for you. It's 10 minutes. All you got to do is tell me who you are, tell me a cool story, anyone you want to thank. It's a chance for you to get an infomercial, and for us to get that messaging out there, our own IO campaign, that the blue team doesn't suck. The blue team is helping people, and we need to get that messaging out there. That's why I started it, so I'd love to have you on it. Because, as I said, no one says thank you. The servers worked all week. Sales didn't lose a deal. They didn't have a blue screen. We need to get credit for that. All right. And these are my references. Any questions? How fucked is the I love this. Pretty fucked. So what I would tell you, because this is unfortunate, this is what I do for a damn living. Put it in early. The smaller you are, the easier and cheaper it is. This is how it is. This is how people join the organization. The bigger you get, the harder it is, the more expensive it is, the more painful it is. But security and compliance, here's where people screw up, is they write either, they could download stuff off the internet and they write these aspirational policies. Aspirational being like, this is what I'd like us to be like, but you're not. So write down what you actually do. Draw a treasure map. No one knows how to read. You know, I'm a Marine, right? Like I got out my crayons and I'm like, here's the little map and here's how I get to yes. Give them a map. Words are hard, right? Those are some tricks on putting in a program. Any other questions here? How many your passwords are currently, what is HIB? Oh, of mine, personally? Not that many. Few. I've rotated them, but I get those alerts. Absolutely. That's the thing, is like the have I been pwned will show up. But you can get have been pwned, Google has it, Microsoft has it, they'll have them. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you all for your time.